the way in which you talk about BLM being targeted is through radical Black feminist pragmatism. Now, I've danced around this, but this is such a huge part of your analysis. Could you explain radical Black feminist pragmatism, RBF? We can shorten it.
I know.
Right?
It's cumbersome, but each word is really important. So
I agree. Yeah.
So radical is a mode of questioning, right? Like I said, radical comes from the Latin radix, which means the root, right? It's a mode of questioning that doesn't take the given as the only place that we can start, right? That says, no, let's actually look at the root or look for the root of the problem. Black feminism is an ethical system. It has deep roots in American political thought, and it is a mode of reasoning that demands that we reason from margin to center, that we take people's lived experiences as the basis for our intellectual questioning, our questions about what justice is, and that centers a kind of politics of care. And then pragmatism is a mode of judgment that guides action, right? And pragmatism here is philosophical pragmatism, not sort of political 1990s third way pragmatism, right? Like pragmatism here is, again, another sort of mode of thinking that is not utopian, right? That embraces imagination, but embraces imagination for action and assumes that as we go forward, we will have to try things, see if they're aligned with our values, and then make adjustments and try again, right? It is a politics of iteration. It involves analysis. It involves imagination, and it involves actually building in the world, right? So each one of these things is really important. So if you have the radical, which questions, right, at the root of the problem, Black feminism, which centers the marginalized and lived experience, and pragmatism, which says, hey, we've got to assess and experiment and act, then you have, I think, a really powerful framework for action that can be both effective and compassionate and transformative all at the same time.
And what ways have you seen this both be successful with BLM and then maybe not so much?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, well, this is a political philosophy, so it undergirds most of the activity in the movement, right? It's just beliefs that are widely shared. And I think one of the ways it's been successful is that it's allowed the movement to sustain itself for almost a decade, right? After being attacked at intervals, right? Attacked at intervals and then praised at other intervals, right? Throughout, as the polity's attention turns toward the activity of the movement and away, as politicians try to persecute members of the movement as a whole, to punish people who are involved in it, or to praise them, and try to sort of co-opt them into sort of inside positions. So radical Black feminist pragmatism has allowed the movement to sort of be built such that it is leaderful, rather than having only a couple of charismatic leaders that can be removed in a variety of different ways, either by being co-opted, being assassinated, just being exhausted, right? Instead, you have a whole ethic of making sure that people who are coming up in movement organizations are able to lead, right, from where they are, and they're taught to organize other people into the movement. Although more of that can and should be done. And that's actually a huge part of what's happening. The conversations that I hear are happening right now. It's all about organizing more people and base building, actually. So that's, that's one thing I think that this political philosophy has done. I think that and enabled to happen. But I think that, movements, especially over a long period of time, right? This movement is no longer new. It's almost 10 years old.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
I know, it's crazy. I know. Over time, transitions have to happen, and people have to reevaluate what they think the best way forward is. And then also external conditions change, right? So it's a little bit of whiplash to go from, a little bit of like breathless media coverage of the biggest protest in U.S. history that was also the most diverse, right, for weeks on end, to the critical race theory panic, right, that has also been sort of taken seriously and fueled by media, and also led to a ton of legislation, right, which the earlier praise did not lead to. Right, not to the same degree, and not without contingency. So, what radical Black feminist pragmatism has to continue to do is to allow this movement to sustain and move forward boldly, even amidst these attacks. And that's not an easy task. It has to allow the movement to continue pushing things like defund. It has to allow the movement to continue talking about housing inequality and what it might mean to, give things away, right, instead of making everything transactional, right? So it has to create a context in which people can feel confident that these sort of waves of interest, disinterest, praise, scorn, persecution, or attempts at co-optation are normal phases of movement. And it's important to dig in and continue to try to push forward with the transformation of common sense, which is the thing that is really going to allow changes to happen, both in terms of concrete policy changes and in terms of changes in our living conditions.
It's about like steadiness and consistency as well, especially in the face of, and this will be my last kind of discussion point here. BLM in many ways helped Biden get elected. I mean, it was the pandemic, and it was outrage about the way that the Republicans and just the country was responding to the murder of George Floyd and others. And yet there has been zero push to get rid of the filibuster in order to pass substantive legislation that would end qualified immunity, that would defund the police in any real way. In fact, Biden was promoting, let's give them more funds so they can be better at their job. The amount of strength, he didn't end up following through on that, but that was something he opined about publicly. The amount of strength that takes, you're only able to continue to move forward with all of these losses stacking up if you have a practical and consistent underpinning.
Right. And one that is really rooted in the notion that is really about creating conditions that you can care for yourself, others, and the polity, because it allows you to turn back to the question of what does it mean to do to help somebody right now? What does it mean to do to defend and save Black lives right now? What does it mean to do? What kind of things can we do in terms of mutual aid, in terms of culture work, in terms of getting new people elected, right? Like, this is not just eschewing electoral politics. It's about also turning your face away from the national, especially presidential politics, but also other national democratic politics, which is dominated, by septa and octogenarians who are acting based on a world that no longer exists, right? Acting out of nostalgia, right, in a large part. So it really is also about packing the decision-making bench with people who share this worldview and hoping that you get there. And when I say get there, I mean get to positions of power in which you can protect your communities and push new policy and institutional arrangements forward before devolution into authoritarianism and fascism.
Yeah, there will be a new fascist at least in the primary in 2024 nationally, and then of course we have these kinds of strengths and systems are immensely important. So I really appreciate your work here, Deva Woodly, Associate Professor of Politics at the New School for Social Research and author of Reckoning: Black Lives Matter and the Democratic Necessity of Social Movements. Can't thank you enough for your time today. Really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.